Are you ready to meet the moment? Ozzy and our friends at Chevrolet are proud to present Real Talk, Real Change to help foster racial equality in America. And we're inviting you to help. Join me, Carlos Watson, as I talk with key leaders from across the country about racial disparities in America's healthcare system. Look for The Carlos Watson Show and Real Talk, Real Change on YouTube and subscribe. Or download The Carlos Watson Show wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to Magic Without Fears, Hermetic podcast. I'm your host, Frater RC. For more and exclusive episodes, visit magicwithoutfears.com. Thank you for your support.
The fourth day of Rudolf Steiner on the chemical wedding of Christian Rosenkreuz. The fourth day is decisive for the spiritual traveler insofar as his position in the suprasensory world is concerned. Once more he meets the lion. The ancient inscription brought to him by the lion contains essentially this demand that he should approach the source from which inspirations flow from the spiritual world. The soul, satisfied with mere imaginative experience, could only allow itself to be addressed, as it were, from the spiritual world, and to use the power of its own will to make these revelations comprehensible. If the full power of the I is to enter the suprasensory world, this I must carry its own consciousness into that world. The soul must rediscover the I and its sensory experiences in the spiritual world. In a certain way, the memory of the kind of experiences one has in the sensory world must emerge in the suprasensory world. Andrea makes this clear by introducing on the fourth day a comedy, that is, a phantom image of events in the physical world. In beholding this phantom picture obtained in the suprasensory realm, the spirit seeker's I is strengthened so that he feels a firm connection between the aspect of his soul that experiences in the suprasensory world and the part that is active through the body in the world of the senses. Andrea's effective method of description convinces us that he wants to address his contemporaries in a most serious manner about a path into the spiritual world appropriate to the epoch of human development in the 16th century, at the beginning of which the author of The Chemical Wedding feels himself placed. The fact that initially serious obstacles hindered a realization of the idealistic claims Andrea placed before his contemporaries was due to the devastating confusion of the 30 Years' War and all that it brought into the more modern era. Progress in human evolution is possible, however, only when personalities of an attitude similar to that of Johann Valentin Andrea oppose the retarding forces of certain world currents with impulses of a truly destructive nature. We can determine whether Andrea succeeded in describing Christian Rosenkreuz as a spiritual seeker able to point effectively from his spiritual experiences of a past epoch to the new path appropriate for the new era, only if we can show that the last days of the chemical wedding relate to experiences that open a perspective into this period. In other words, if we can show that Christian Rosenkreuz is able to carry his I over into the new period. The most significant experience for Christian Rosenkreuz on the fourth day is his introduction to the kings and their subsequent beheading. The author of The Chemical Wedding indicates the nature of this experience by symbolic figures standing on a small altar. In these symbols, the human soul can behold its relationship to the universe and its evolution. Spiritual investigators have always tried, by such symbols, to bring intimately before the soul how their own being lives within the cosmic being. The book points to human thinking, which, in conformity with the human organization, is an influx of objective cosmic creative thought into the soul. The little light indicates that these world creative thoughts are active as light ether in the universe. They become productive of knowledge and illumination in humankind. The role of Cupid, who blows on the light, refers to the spirit seeker's perception that light and love are the two forces that, as polar opposites, are etherically at the basis of all existence and becoming. We judge this perception correctly, however, only if we see in the physical light and the love active on the physical plane the materially effective revelations of original spiritual forces. The creative thought element of the world lives freely in the primal spiritual force of light, and the creative will element lives in love. Among the symbols is a sphere, to indicate how human experience in encountering cosmic life becomes a member of that life. The clock indicates how the soul is interwoven with the progress of cosmic time, just as the sphere is interwoven with its spatial existence. The little well from which blood-red waters flows, the skull and serpent demonstrate the seer's vision of birth and death as based in the cosmic all. Such symbols are among the very oldest. Valentin Andrea uses such symbolic figures in a similar way to that used in ancient meeting places that served societies admitting people for initiation into the mysteries of life. Because Andrea uses them in the same way, he shows that, in his opinion, such symbols are imaginations based on the evolution of the human soul and can stimulate it to perceive the mysteries of existence. We must ask, what is the meaning of the Hall of the Kings into which Christian Rosenkreutz is led, and what was experienced in the presence of the kings who were beheaded? The symbols show the answer. Spiritual seekers are meant to bear witness to how they are grounded in cosmic being with their own being. They should perceive in the world what is within them. What is within the world they should perceive in themselves. They can do this only when they see in things and events cosmic images of what works and weaves within them. When they no longer view inner experiences simply as ideas proceeding from their own souls, but perceive them as images representing the growth and becoming of the whole cosmos. The kings stand before Christian Rosenkreutz to say, as it were, "Thus your soul forces live within your own being."
From the New York Times best-selling author Paula McLean comes a propulsive new mystery, a missing girl, a broken woman. The truth is hard to see when the stars go dark. When the Stars Go Dark is available wherever books and audiobooks are sold.
Are you ready to meet the moment? Ozzy and our friends at Chevrolet are proud to present Real Talk, Real Change to help foster racial equality in America. And we're inviting you to help. Join me, Carlos Watson, as I talk with key leaders from across the country about racial disparities in America's healthcare system. Look for The Carlos Watson Show and Real Talk, Real Change on YouTube and subscribe. Or download The Carlos Watson Show wherever you get your podcasts.
The king's experiences reflect events that must take place in the soul under certain conditions. Christian Rosenkreutz faces what happens in the Hall of the Kings. His whole soul sees itself in it. The beheading of the kings is an event in his own soul's evolution. He arrived in the Hall of the Kings with forces of cognition that are the same as they were before he gained entry to the spiritual world. By living into this world, however, those forces of cognition have experiences that are related to the material world. Not only does the spiritual world light up when faced by the soul, but the material world also reveals itself before the soul. in forms that cannot be seen in their full meaning by those whose powers of observation remain in the material realm. The revelation of our divided human nature is a part of these experiences. The forces that are the basis of physical growth are shown to be also active in phenomena usually considered to be of a soul nature. The power of memory and the impulses for forming thoughts prove to be dependent upon the same kind of physical condition as growth. The forces of growth develop progressively in childhood and youth. After this, they decrease, finally becoming the cause of death. Memory and the forces for forming ideas, on the other hand, can decline from an early period in life. While we are awake, these forces pass through the same process of decline that the whole organism experiences in the second half of life, until death. Conversely, while we sleep, this decline is compensated for, and memory and the forces of forming ideas undergo a resurrection. The soul organism is grafted, like a parasite, upon the whole human organism. The soul can supply the condition for memory and representations because in the course of a day, the soul follows the same path to death that the whole organism traverses in the course of earthly life. Hence, for the spiritual investigator, the soul organism becomes a metamorphosis of the whole organism. The soul organism thus appears as the part of the complete organism that develops more intensely the forces responsible for manifesting life between birth and death. These forces can therefore become the basis of the soul's conceptual life. Creative cosmic thought, being, flows into the daily decline of the forces of the soul organism and becomes human conceptual life. It is essential for the spiritual seeker to perceive the material foundation of soul processes as transmuted outer material processes of the whole organism. It is a paradoxical fact that one first sees the material conditions of the soul life when on the way to the spirit. The realization can mark the beginning of a temptation. One can remain at the point of discovery that soul events manifest themselves in their material form and, while seeking the spirit, can be driven into a materialistic world conception. If one really penetrates what is in question, however, the opposite takes place. One observes the creative spiritual powers that reveal themselves in the formation of substances in the material basis of soul life, and thereby becomes able to recognize spirit as the basis of the whole organism and its life course. Christian Rosenkreutz is thus confronted with the important experience that reveals to him an alchemy accomplishing its work within the processes of nature. The material processes of the whole organism are transformed before his spiritual eye. They become something out of which the soul events flash forth like the light in the external process of combustion. But in so doing, these soul events also reveal where they reach their limits. They correspond to the processes in the organism that lead to death. Christian Rosenkreutz is brought before the kings of his own soul being, before his powers of knowledge. They appear to him as a metamorphosis of the whole organism, but the forces of growth change into cognitional powers only by accepting death into themselves. For this reason, they carry in them only the knowledge of what is dead. Death is included in all natural processes in such a way that the non-living exists in everything. Our ordinary process of knowledge is directed upon what is non-living. Because it itself is dead, it grasps the inorganic. It understands the plant and all that is living only insofar as they are touched by the non-living. Every plant contains inorganic processes over and above what it is as a living entity. Ordinarily, our forces of knowledge grasp these inorganic processes, but they do not grasp what is living. What is living becomes visible only insofar as it manifests itself in the non-living. Christian Rosenkreuz witnesses the death of his soul kings, his forces of knowledge, as these arise from the metamorphosis of the material forces of the whole organism without the human being passing over from the alchemy of nature to the alchemy of art. This has to take place in such a way that within one's soul one gives the forces of knowledge a character they do not possess through their merely organic evolutionary processes. What is essential in the ascending powers of growth, where death has not yet encroached, has to be awakened in the forces of cognition. Natural alchemy must be carried further.
Are you ready to meet the moment? Ozzy and our friends at Chevrolet are proud to present Real Talk, Real Change to help foster racial equality in America, and we're inviting you to help. Join me, Carlos Watson, as I talk with key leaders from across the country about racial disparities in America's healthcare system. Look for The Carlos Watson Show and Real Talk, Real Change on YouTube and subscribe. Or download The Carlos Watson Show wherever you get your podcasts.